The crystal chandelier cast fractured rainbows across the ballroom floor, each shard of light dancing mockingly over Logan Montgomery's polished shoes. He stood rigid in his tailored tuxedo, watching the city's elite swirl around him like vultures, circling prey. Tonight was supposed to be his engagement celebration. Instead, it felt like his funeral. "Smile, darling," Victoria Albright whispered beside him, her manicured fingers digging into his arm with practiced precision. The cameras are watching. Logan's jaw clenched as he forced his lips into what he hoped resembled happiness. Victoria was perfection incarnate, blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, diamonds glittering at her throat, her red dress hugging curves that had graced magazine covers. She was everything his family wanted in a daughter-in-law, everything the business world expected. She was also the human embodiment of everything wrong with his life. "This merger will revolutionize both our companies," Richard Montgomery's voice boomed from across the room as he addressed a cluster of investors. "The union of Montgomery Enterprises and Albright Industries represents the future of corporate America." Union. Merger. Logan's stomach turned at the clinical language used to describe what was supposed to be his marriage. He wasn't a person. To these people, he was a chess piece, valuable only for the moves he could make on behalf of the family empire. Emma Harper watched from the shadows near the service entrance, her simple black dress a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. As Logan's executive assistant, she'd organized hundreds of events like this, but she'd never seen him look so trapped. His usual confidence had been replaced by something that looked dangerously close to desperation. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a split second, Logan's mask slipped and Emma saw the raw panic underneath. He mouthed a single word: "Help." Before Emma could process what was happening, Logan was moving through the crowd with predatory focus. The conversations around him faded to white noise as he approached her, his dark eyes never leaving hers. She'd worked for him for 3 years, had seen him command boardrooms and close billion-dollar deals, but she'd never seen him look at her like this, like she was his lifeline in a stormy sea. "Emma," he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. "I need you to trust me, Logan. What are you?" He cupped her face in his hands, his touch surprisingly gentle, for someone who'd built his reputation on being ruthless. Seemed to slow as he leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. She could smell his cologne, could see the desperation flickering in his eyes like a caged animal. "Forgive me," he whispered. Then his lips were on hers, and the world exploded into chaos. The kiss was soft at first, almost hesitant, as if he were giving her a chance to pull away. But when she didn't, when she found herself melting into him despite every rational thought screaming at her to stop, he deepened it, his hands tangling in her hair as he pressed her closer. Ow. The ballroom fell silent. Champagne glasses froze halfway to the lips. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the string quartet faltered, their melody dissolving into discordant notes that perfectly matched the shock rippling through the crowd. When Logan finally pulled away, his chest was heaving as if he'd just run a marathon. He turned to face the room, his arms still wrapped protectively around Emma's waist, and she felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes settling on them like a physical force. "I can't do this," Logan announced, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "I won't marry someone I don't love when the woman I do love is standing right here." Victoria's gasp cut through the air like breaking glass. Her face had gone chalk white, her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looking garish under the harsh lights. "Logan," she breathed, her voice shaking with barely contained fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Emma felt the room spinning around. Felt her carefully constructed world crumbling beneath her feet. Logan's declaration echoed in her ears. But all she could think about was the way his lips had felt against hers. The way he'd held her like she was something precious instead of just another employee. "I'm choosing my own life for once, Logan," said, his voice steady, despite the hurricane he'd just unleashed. "I'm sorry, Victoria, but this engagement is over." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a dam bursting, the room erupted into chaos. Voices rose in shock and outrage, Cameras flashed like lightning in the darkness, and Emma found herself at the center of a storm she'd never asked to be part of. Richard Montgomery's face had turned an alarming shade of purple, while Victoria's mother looked ready to faint. The business partners Logan was supposed to impress were already pulling out their phones, no doubt to warn their associates about the Montgomery heir's spectacular public meltdown. But Logan seemed oblivious too. The destruction around him, his focus was entirely on Emma, his dark eyes searching her face as if memorizing every detail. "Come with me," he said quietly, extending his hand. "Please." Emma stared at his outstretched palm, knowing that taking it would change everything. Her quiet life, her careful plans, her safe existence in the shadows would be gone the moment she placed her hand in his. But as she looked into his eyes, saw the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide, she realized she'd already made her choice the moment she'd kissed him back. She took his hand. Together, they walked through the crowd of shocked faces toward the exit, leaving behind a ballroom full of whispers and done engagement that would be remembered as one of the most scandalous moments in high society history. As they stepped into the cool night air, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just jumped off a cliff without knowing if there was anything to catch her at the bottom. But for the first time in her life, she didn't care. The cool Manhattan air hit Emma's face like a slap, shocking her back to reality.
Out!
Behind them, the ballroom doors burst open, and she could hear Victoria's voice rising to a shriek that shattered the night's relative peace. "Logan Montgomery, you get back here this instant!" Logan's grip on Emma's hand tightened as he guided her toward his sleek black Maserati, the car's engine already purring to life as his driver saw them approaching. But Victoria's heels clicked against the marble steps like gunshots each step, bringing her closer to the confrontation Emma desperately wanted to avoid. "Don't you dare run from me," Victoria snarled, her perfect composure finally cracking. The woman who'd graced countless magazine covers now looked like a beautiful nightmare, her red dress flowing behind her like spilled blood. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Logan turned slowly, his body positioning itself between Emma and Victoria's fury. "I've saved us both from a mistake," he said calmly, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched into a fist. Victoria's laugh was bitter and sharp. "A mistake, Logan? We've been planning this for 2 years. Our families, the merger, the future, we mapped out together. You're going to throw all of that away for your secretary?" The word secretary dripped from her lips like poison. Emma flinched, feeling the familiar sting of being reduced to nothing more than her job title. She'd worked her way up from poverty, had earned her MBA while working 3 jobs, and had proven herself capable of managing Logan's complex business dealings. But in Victoria's eyes, she would always be just the help. "She has a name," Logan said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "And she's worth more than all your family's money combined." Victoria's eyes narrowed as she turned her attention to Emma for the first time. "You," she hissed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger. "Did you plan this? How long have you been working to seduce him? How long have you been playing the innocent little assistant while plotting to destroy my life?" Emma found her voice at last, her spine straightening despite the tremor in her hands. "I didn't plan anything. I didn't even know what he was going to do until he did it." "Liar," Victoria spat. "Women like you are all the same. You see a wealthy man, and you'll do anything to get your claws into him. Well, congratulations. You've just painted a target on your back that you'll never escape." The threat hung in the air like smoke, making Emma's skin crawl. She'd always known that the world Logan inhabited was dangerous, but she'd never imagined she'd become a player in its games. "That's enough," Logan said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Emma had nothing to do with my decision, Victoria. The blame is mine alone." Victoria's perfectly lipstick mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "Oh, Logan, you sweet, naive boy. You think this is just about blame? This is about consequences. I promise you, both of you will face them." She turned on her heel and stalked back toward the ballroom, but not before throwing one last venomous look over her shoulder. "Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. It won't." The silence that followed her departure was deafening. Emma stood frozen, her mind reeling from the encounter. while Logan watched Victoria disappear back into the building with an expression she couldn't read. "Get in the car," he said quietly, opening the passenger door for her. Emma hesitated. "Logan, what have we done?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. It wasn't just desire or gratitude or even guilt. It was something deeper, something that looked dangerously like hope. "We've started something," he said simply. "I don't know what it is yet, but I know I can't go back to pretending anymore." The drive through the city was quiet, the only sound. The soft hum of the engine and the distant noise of traffic. Emma stared out the window, watching the glittering lights of Manhattan blur past, while Logan's hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "My penthouse," he replied, then caught her sharp look. "You can't go home tonight, Emma. The press will be there within hours. My place is secure." Logic was sound, but Emma's heart hammered against her ribs anyway. She'd been to Logan's apartment exactly once, to drop off some urgent documents. When he'd been sick with the flu, even then, she'd been struck by how different it was from what she'd expected. No gaudy displays of wealth, no cold minimalism. Instead, she'd found warm woods, soft lighting, and books everywhere. Real books with worn spines and dog-eared pages. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a pre-war building overlooking Central Park. As they stepped off the private elevator, Emma was once again struck by the contrast between Logan's public persona and his private self. The space felt more like a sanctuary than a showcase. All warm earth tones and comfortable furniture that actually looked lived in. "Drink?" Logan asked, heading toward a well-stocked bar in the corner of the living room. Emma nodded, though. She wasn't sure alcohol was the best idea given the circumstances. Logan poured 2 glasses of whiskey, neat, and handed one to her before settling onto the couch beside her. Not close enough to crowd her, but near enough that she could smell. His cologne could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I owe you an explanation," he said finally, his voice quiet in the dimly lit room. Emma took a sip of whiskey, letting the burn ground her. "You owe me more than that, Logan. You just appended both our lives without asking my permission." I nodded, accepting the criticism without argument. "You're right. But Emma, if I'd asked, would you have said yes?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Emma found herself studying his face in the soft lamplight, seeing details she'd never noticed before: the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead when he wasn't perfectly groomed, the vulnerability in his eyes that he'd never let show at the office. "I don't know," she admitted. "But that's the point, isn't it? You didn't give me the choice." "Because I'm a coward," Logan said, his voice rough with self-recrimination. "Because I've spent my entire life doing what other people expected of me, and for one moment tonight, I wanted to do something that was entirely my own choice." Emma set down her glass, her hand shaking slightly. What was that choice exactly?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you used me as an escape route from a marriage you didn't want." Logan flinched as if she'd slapped him. "That what you think? That you're just convenient? What else am I supposed to think?" Emma's voice rose despite her attempt to stay calm. "You barely look at me most days. I'm efficient, reliable Emma who handles your schedule and brings you coffee. I'm not the kind of woman men like you fall in love with." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and painful. Emma immediately regretted saying them, but she couldn't take them back. The whiskey had loosened her tongue, and 3 years of carefully maintained professional distance had finally cracked under the pressure of the evening's events. Logan set down his own glass and turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense in the lamplight. "You think I'd barely look at you?" Something in his voice made Emma's breath catch. "Logan, Emma, I look at you every day. I notice when you change. Your hair. When you wear that blue dress that brings out your eyes. When you're stressed about something and trying to hide it behind your professional smile. I notice everything about you, and it's been driving me slowly insane for months." The confession hit her like a physical blow. Emma stared at him, searching his face for any sign that he was lying. But all she saw was raw honesty and something that looked dangerously like longing. "Then why?" she began, but Logan cut her off. Because you work for me. Because I was engaged to someone else. Because I knew that if I ever touched you, if I ever let myself cross that line, I wouldn't be able to go back. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And tonight, when I saw you standing there watching me slowly suffocate, I realized I didn't want to go back. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Emma could feel her carefully constructed walls crumbling, could feel herself being pulled toward, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Logan," she said softly, "what happens now?" He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands, just as he had in the ballroom. But this time, there was no audience, no performance, no desperate escape plan. This time, it was just them, and the choice was entirely hers. "Now," he said, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone, "we figure out what we're willing to risk for something real." Emma woke to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back, and she bolted upright in Logan's guest bedroom, her heart racing. She'd fallen asleep in his arms on the couch, their conversation having drifted from confessions to quiet observations about art, books, and dreams they'd never shared with anyone else. Logan had carried her to the guest room sometime after midnight, his touch gentle and respectful, even as the air between them crackled with unresolved tension. Now her phone screen showed 47 missed calls and twice as many text messages. With trembling fingers, she opened the first news alert, and her stomach dropped. "Montgomery heir abandons bride for secretary," the headline screamed from her screen in bold letters, accompanied by a photo that made her want to disappear forever. Someone had captured the exact moment Logan had kissed her. Her face turned up to his, her eyes closed, her hands fisted in his jacket. She looked like a woman completely lost in the moment, not someone being used as an escape route. More headlines followed in rapid succession. "Love triangle rocks," "High society," "Emma Harper," "From rags to riches romance," "The secretary who stole a billionaire's heart." Each article was worse than the last, painting her as either a gold-digging opportunist or a romantic heroine, neither of which bore any resemblance to the truth. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call from her younger sister, Mia. "Emma, what the hell is going on?"
Alan.
Mia's voice was breathless with excitement. "You're all over the internet. Is it true? Are you really dating Logan Montgomery?" "Complicated," Emma said weakly, running a hand through her tangled hair. "Complicated how? The pictures look pretty straightforward to me. He's gorgeous, Em, and rich, like stupid rich. How long has this been going on?" Before Emma could answer, she heard the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside her room. Logan appeared in the doorway, already dressed in dark jeans and a white, button-down shirt, his hair damped from a shower. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine, while she probably looked like she'd been hit by a truck. "I have to go," she told Mia, ending the call, despite her sister's protests. "Good morning," Logan said softly, his eyes searching her face. "How are you holding up?" Emma held up her phone, showing him the headline. "How do you think?" Logan's jaw tightened as he scanned the article. "I'm sorry. I knew this would happen. But seeing it, Logan, they've turned me into a character in some twisted fairy tale. Yes. Half of them think I'm a scheming gold digger, and the other half think I'm Cinderella. Neither version has anything to do with who I actually am." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I know who you are, Emma. The people who matter know who you are. The rest is just noise." "Easy for you to say," Emma shot back, frustration boiling over. "You were born into this world. You know how to handle the press, the gossip, the constant scrutiny. I'm just a small-town girl who worked her way through college and thought she could keep her head down and build a quiet life. This isn't noise. To me, Logan, this is my reputation. my career, my future being torn apart by strangers. Logan sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance between them. You're right. I'm sorry. I've lived with this fishbowl existence for so long that I sometimes forget what it's like for people who haven't. Emma's anger deflated slightly at his admission. What happens now? Do I go back to work and pretend nothing's changed? Why quit and disappear? What's the protocol for fake girlfriends in your world? Is that what you think this is?
Arrogance.
The voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that made Emma look up. Fake. The question hung between them, loaded with implications that Emma wasn't ready to face. Because the truth was, nothing about the way Logan had looked at her last night. The way he'd held her, the way he'd talked to her like she was the most important person in his world, had felt fake. And that terrified her more than any headline ever could. I don't know what to think, she admitted. 24 hours ago, I was your assistant. Now I'm supposedly the great love of your life. Forgive me if I'm having trouble adjusting to the whiplash. Logan was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Emma, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded, not trusting her voice. When I kissed you last night, what did you feel? The question hit her like a physical blow. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks as she remembered the way her body had responded to his touch, the way she'd melted into him despite every rational thought telling her to pull away. That's not fair, she whispered. Why not? 'Cause you know what I felt. You were there. Logan leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. I know what I hoped you felt, but hoping and knowing are two different things. Emma closed her eyes, trying to block out the intensity of his gaze. But even with her eyes closed, she could feel him watching her, waiting for an answer that could change everything between them. I felt, she stopped, opened her eyes, and looked directly at him. I felt like I was falling off a cliff. And was that a good thing or a bad thing? Emma's breath caught at the softness in his voice. I don't know yet. I'm still falling. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Logan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His fingers were warm, calloused from the sailing he did on weekends. And Emma found herself wondering what those hands would feel like on her skin. Emma, he said quietly, I know I handled this wrong. I know I should have talked to you first, should have given you a choice in how this played out. But I can't regret it, because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Before Emma could respond, both their phones began ringing simultaneously. Logan glanced at his screen and cursed under his breath. My father, he said grimly. I have to take this. Emma watched him step into the hallway, his voice immediately shifting into the controlled, professional tone she knew so well. Her own phone showed a call from her boss, former boss at Montgomery Enterprises. Janet had been Emma's mentor and friend, one of the few people at the company who treated her as more than just hired help. Emma? Janet's voice was strained when she answered. Where are you? Richard Montgomery is asking questions, and the entire executive floor is in chaos. I'm safe, Emma said carefully. What kind of questions? The kind that's August's. He thinks you orchestrated this whole thing. Emma, he's talking about launching an investigation into your employment history, your finances, and your personal life. He wants to find something he can use to discredit you. Emma's blood ran cold. What does that mean for my job? Janet was quiet for a moment. Honey, I think your job is the least of your concerns right now. Richard Montgomery is not a man who forgives public humiliation. And in his mind, you're the reason his son just torched the most important business deal of the decade. The line went dead, leaving Emma staring at her phone in growing horror. Through the thin walls, she could hear Logan's voice rising in anger as he argued with his father. She was trapped between two powerful men, neither of whom seemed to care. That she was a person with her own dreams and fears and desires. For the first time since the previous night, Emma allowed herself to truly consider what she'd gotten herself into. She'd spent 3 years carefully building her career, her reputation, her independence. Now, in the span of a single kiss, all of that was in jeopardy. But as she sat in Logan's guest bedroom, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully ordered life, Emma realized something that surprised her. She wasn't sorry. Terrified, yes. Overwhelmed, absolutely. But not sorry. Because for one perfect moment last night, she'd felt truly alive. Logan appeared in the doorway again, his face grim. "We need to talk." Emma looked up at him, this man, who'd turned her world upside down with a single impulsive act, and made a decision that would have shocked her careful, cautious former self. "Yes," she said simply. "We do." Logan's face was granite as he closed the bedroom door behind him, the sound echoing with finality. Emma could see the weight of whatever conversation he'd just had with his father etched in the tension of his shoulders, the tight set of his jaw. "How bad is it?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "My father wants to meet with you this afternoon, alone." Logan's voice was carefully controlled, but Emma could hear the anger simmering beneath the surface. "He's convinced. You orchestrated everything that you've been manipulating me for months." Emma felt her stomach drop. "And what did you tell him?" "The truth. That this was my decision, my choice, and that he needs to leave you out of it." Logan ran a hand through his hair, disrupting the perfect styling. "He didn't believe me. Of course he didn't." Emma stood, pacing to the window that overlooked Central Park. The city stretched out below them, bustling with people living their normal lives. Unaware that her world was crumbling 20 stories above their heads, in his mind, there's no way his perfect son would throw away his perfect marriage unless some scheming woman was pulling the strings. Logan moved to stand behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Emma, you need to know that Victoria's family is pushing for some kind of legal action. Breach of contract, emotional distress, public humiliation. My lawyers are handling it, but I'm going to be collateral damage," Emma finished, her reflection in the window looking pale and fragile. "Not if I can help it." Emma turned to face him, studying the determination in his dark eyes. "Logan, what are you really willing to sacrifice for this?" For me, the question seemed to catch him off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when the dust settles and the lawyers are done, and the press moves on to the next scandal, what's left? You could lose your position at the company, your inheritance, and your family's approval. Are you prepared for that?" Logan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching her face. "Are you asking me to choose between you and everything else?" "I'm asking you to be realistic about what this costs, because right now I'm the one paying the price for your moment of rebellion." The words hit their mark. Logan flinched as if she'd struck him, and Emma immediately regretted the harshness of her tone. But she needed him to understand that this wasn't some romantic movie where love conquered all. This was real life, with real consequences that would follow them long after the initial rush of defiance wore off. "You're right," Logan said quietly. "You didn't ask for any of this, and you shouldn't have to bear the consequences of my decisions alone." Emma felt something cold settle in her chest at his words. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you want out, if you want me to fix this, to find a way to get your life back, I'll do it. Even if it means admitting the whole thing was a publicity stunt. Even if it means going back to Victoria." The offer hung between them like a loaded weapon. Emma stared at him, searching his face for any sign of what he truly wanted her to say. But Logan had slipped back behind his professional mask, the one he wore in boardrooms and hostile negotiations. "Is that what you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to be happy," he said, which wasn't an answer at all. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, though she couldn't quite say why. Maybe it was frustration at the impossible situation they'd found themselves in, or disappointment that Logan was already looking for escape routes, or fear that she was falling for a man who saw her as just another problem to be solved. Not what I asked, she said, her voice stronger now. I asked what you want, Logan, not what you think you should want, not what would be best for everyone else. What do you want? Logan's carefully constructed composure cracked, and for a moment, Emma saw the same vulnerable man who'd held her on the couch the night before, talking about dreams and fears and the weight of other people's expectations. I want you, he said rawly. I want to wake up every morning and know that you're the first person I'll see and the last person I'll talk to before I go to sleep. I want to take you places you've never been and show you things you've only read about in books. I want to watch you argue with stuffy board members and put arrogant clients in their place because you're brilliant and fierce and you don't even realize how extraordinary you are. Emma's breath caught as he stepped closer, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made her knees weak. I want to know what you look like when you wake up in the morning, what you sound like when you laugh at something that's actually funny, instead of just politely humorous. I want to know whether you steal the covers and what you dream about and whether you'll still want me. When you realize that underneath all the money and the family name, I'm just a man who's been sleepwalking through his life until you woke me up. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest, and terrifying in its completeness. Emma felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling, felt herself being pulled toward something that promised either salvation or destruction, possibly both. Logan, she whispered, but before she could say anything else, his phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed his lawyer's name. Logan glanced at Emma, his expression apologetic, and answered, Doda, what do you have for me? Marcus. Logan's voice immediately shifted back to business mode, but Emma could see the tension in his posture as he listened to whatever the lawyer was telling him. His face grew progressively darker as the conversation continued. Are you sure? Logan asked finally. There's no mistake. Emma watched his expression shift from concern to something that looked like fury. I see. Yes, I understand. Set up the meeting for tomorrow morning. And Marcus. Make sure everything is documented. Logan ended the call and stood silent for a long moment, his back turned to Emma as he stared out the window. What is it? Emma asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. When Logan turned back to her, his expression was unlike anything she'd ever seen before. Gone was the vulnerable man who'd just confessed his feelings. In his place was someone who looked capable of burning down the world. Victoria's family isn't just pushing for legal action, he said, his voice deadly calm. They've hired a private investigative firm to dig into your background, your finances, and your family. They're looking for anything they can use to prove you're a gold digger who seduced me for money. Emma felt the blood drained from her face. My family. Logan, my sister is in college, and me parents run a small diner in Ohio. They can't afford to get dragged into this. It won't be, Logan said, and there was something in his voice that made Emma shiver. So I'm not going to let the Albrights destroy innocent people to salvage their wounded pride. Emma had worked for Logan long enough to recognize the tone he used when he was about to do something ruthless in business. She'd seen him eviscerate competitors and hostile takeover attempts with the same cold precision. But she'd never been on this side of it before, had never seen him preparing to go to war for something personal. What are you going to do? She asked. Logan smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. I'm going to remind everyone exactly why you don't cross a Montgomery. Victoria wants to play dirty? Fine, but she's about to learn that I've been playing this game a lot longer than she has. Emma felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at this man she thought she knew. In that moment, she realized that Logan Montgomery wasn't just a wealthy businessman with a rebellious streak. He was someone who'd been raised in a world where power and money were weapons, and he knew exactly how to use both. The question was whether he was fighting for her or simply fighting to win. She said carefully, What exactly are you planning? He turned to look at her, and for a moment, his expression softened. I'm planning to protect what's mine, he said simply. The possessiveness in his voice should have annoyed her. Emma had spent her entire adult life fighting to be seen as more than someone's property or prize. But coming from Logan, in this moment, it didn't feel like objectification. It felt like a promise. And what am I exactly? She asked, stepping closer to him. Logan reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones. "You're the woman I'm willing to lose everything for," he said softly. "The question is, are you willing to let me?" Emma's answer came not in words but in action. She rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to Logan's, pouring 3 years of suppressed longing and 2 days of chaos into a kiss that tasted like promises and rebellion. This time there was no audience, no desperate escape plan, no ulterior motive. This time it was just them choosing each other despite the storm raging around them. When they finally broke apart, Logan rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes," Emma whispered, surprised by her own certainty. "But Logan, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Whatever you're planning to do to Victoria and her family, don't become someone you'll hate yourself for being. Don't let their ugliness turn you into something ugly too." Logan was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. "You realize they're not going to stop, right? Victoria's parents have built their reputation on never backing down from a fight. They'll keep coming after you, after your family, until they find a way to discredit you or drive you away. Then we'll deal with it together," Emma said firmly. "But we do it without losing ourselves in the process." Logan smiled, and this time it was the genuine expression she'd fallen in love with, not the predatory grin from earlier. "How did I get so lucky?" "You kissed the right girl at the right moment," Emma replied, and was rewarded by Logan's laugh, rich and warm, and completely unguarded. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Logan's phone ringing again, this time. However, the caller ID showed a name that made them both freeze. Victoria Albright. Logan looked at Emma, a question in his eyes. She nodded, understanding what he was asking. Together, they would face whatever Victoria had to say. Victoria Logan answered, putting the call on speaker. "Logan." Victoria's voice was crisp, controlled, and somehow more terrifying than her fury had been the night before. "I think it's time we had a civilized conversation about this situation." "I'm listening. Good. I'm sure you've heard by now that my family is exploring our legal options regarding your very public breach of our engagement contract. What you may not know is that we've also begun looking into the background of your little secretary." Emma felt Logan's hand find hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture of solidarity. "Her name is Emma," Logan said coldly. "And whatever you think you're going to find—" "Oh, but we've already found something interesting," Victoria interrupted, her voice taking on a satisfied purr. "It seems Miss Harper's college tuition was paid for by a scholarship from the Montgomery Foundation. A scholarship that was personally approved by you, Logan, 3 years ago. Right around the time she started working at your company." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. She'd received the scholarship during her final year of graduate school, a merit-based award that had allowed her to focus on her studies instead of working 3 jobs. She'd never known who had approved it, had never thought to ask. "So you see," Victoria continued, "it appears that your supposedly spontaneous romance has been in development for quite some time. I wonder what the press will make of that revelation. The narrative of a lonely billionaire who handpicked his future mistress and spent years grooming her for this moment." "That's not what happened," Logan said, but Emma could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Isn't it?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You saw a beautiful, struggling graduate student and decided to play benefactor. You gave her money, then gave her a job, then gave her access to your world. And now you expect people to believe that your feelings for her are genuine? Please, Logan. We both know you're many things, but naive isn't one of them." Emma pulled her hand free from Logan's, her mind reeling. The scholarship had been awarded based on academic merit, but Victoria was right, the timing was suspicious. And if Logan had been the one to approve it, had he been watching her, planning this, even then? "Emma," Logan said quietly, reaching for her again, but she stepped back. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you approve?" "My scholarship?" Logan's silence was answer enough. "Oh, this is delicious." Victoria Paradento the phone. She didn't know, did she? "Logan, you bastard. You didn't tell her that you've been pulling her strings for years." "Shut up, Victoria," Logan snapped, but the damage was done. Emma stared at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The powerful man who could have anyone, anything, who had decided 3 years ago that he wanted her and had systematically arranged her life to make it happen. The scholarship, the job, the careful professional distance that had made his eventual pursuit seem organic rather than calculated. "You planned this," she said, her voice hollow. "All of it." Logan said urgently, stepping toward her.
Emma.
"It wasn't like that. Yes, I approved your scholarship, but it was because you deserved it. Your professors recommended you. Your grades were perfect, and our thesis was brilliant. I didn't even meet you until you started working at the company. But you knew who I was." Logan hesitated. "I remembered your name from the scholarship applications. When you interviewed for the assistant position, I was curious. But Emma, I swear to you, I never planned this. The feelings I have for you, they developed naturally over the past 3 years. What happened at the engagement party was real. Emma wanted to believe him. Every cell in her body was screaming at her to believe him, to trust the man who'd held her so gently, who'd confessed his deepest fears and desires just minutes before. But Victoria's revelation had shattered something fundamental in her understanding of their relationship. "How do I know that?" she asked, tears streaming down her face now. "How do I know that anything between us has been real?"
Da-da-da-da-da.
"Power to control my life for 3 years, Logan. My education, my job, my financial security. How do I know that I chose you instead of being manipulated into it?" "Because I know you," Logan said desperately. "I know that you hate romantic comedies, but cry at documentaries about animals. I know that you drink your coffee black because you think adding cream is wasteful. But you put sugar in your tea because life's too short not to enjoy small pleasures. I know that you're afraid of heights, but you went up to the observation deck of the Empire State Building anyway because you didn't want to miss the experience. I know you because I pay attention, because I care, not because I've been manipulating you." Emma closed her eyes, torn between the man she'd fallen in love with and the cold reality of power imbalances and hidden agendas. When she opened them, again, Logan was watching her with an expression of such raw vulnerability that it nearly broke her resolve. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to think about all of this without you looking at me like that, without my judgment being clouded by whatever I feel for you." Logan nodded slowly, though she could see how much the words cost him. "What do you need?" "I need to go home. To my real home in Ohio. I need to talk to my parents, 2 people who knew me before any of this happened. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not Emma Harper, Logan Montgomery's assistant, and then." Emma looked at this man who had turned her world upside down, who had given her everything she'd ever dreamed of, and then revealed that it might all be built on a foundation of manipulation and lies. But she also saw the man who had risked everything to choose her, who had held her while she cried, who had looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. "And then I'll decide whether what we have is real enough to fight for," she said. Logan nodded, his expression carefully controlled. "I'll have my driver take you to the airport. Take the company jet." "No," Emma interrupted. "No more help from you, Logan. If I'm going to figure this out, I need to do it without any more of your influence." The rejection clearly stung, but Logan accepted it with grace. "I understand. But Emma, whatever you decide, know that I love you. Not the idea of you, not the convenient timing of you, but you, the real you. And I'll wait as long as it takes for you to believe that." 3 days later, Emma sat on the front porch of her childhood home in small-town Ohio, watching the sun set over fields of corn and trying to make sense of her life. Her parents had listened to the whole story without judgment, her father's weathered hands steady on her shoulders, while her mother made cup after cup of tea and asked the kinds of practical questions that cut straight to the heart of things. "Do you love him, sweetheart?" her mother had asked finally. "I think so," Emma had admitted. "But I don't know how to separate what I feel from what he's made me feel. Love isn't something that can be manufactured," her father had said in his quiet way. "Opportunity can be created, circumstances can be arranged, but the heart wants what it wants regardless of manipulation." Now, as Emma watched the familiar landscape of her childhood, She thought about Logan's words from that morning at his penthouse. He'd said he wanted to know what she dreamed about, what she looked like when she woke up, whether she'd still want him when she realized he was just a man beneath all the money and power. But the question wasn't whether she'd still want him. The question was whether he'd wanted her from the beginning, or just the idea of having something he'd chosen and shaped to his specifications. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Not from Logan, who had respected her request for space, but from Janet at Montgomery Enterprises. Turn on Channel 7. Now. Emma fumbled for the remote, tuning into the local news affiliate just as a familiar face filled the screen. Logan stood behind a podium in what looked like the Montgomery Enterprises conference room. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Victoria, looking perfectly composed and utterly satisfied. After much reflection, Logan was saying, his voice carrying the flat, professional tone Emma knew he used when he was lying. I've realized that my actions at our engagement party were inexcusable. The stress of the wedding preparations and the pressures of merging our companies led me to act in a way that was unfair to everyone involved, particularly to my fiancée Victoria and to my employee Emma Harper. Emma's blood turned to ice as she watched Logan, the man who had told her he'd rather lose everything than pretend anymore, doing exactly that. Ms. Harper was an unwilling participant in my moment of poor judgment, Logan continued, and any suggestion that she acted inappropriately or with ulterior motives is completely false. I take full responsibility for my actions, and I'm grateful that Victoria has been gracious enough to forgive my temporary lapse in judgment. Victoria stepped forward, her smile radiant and completely fake. Logan and I are stronger than ever, she said, her hand finding his arm in a gesture of possession. Sometimes it takes a crisis to remind you what truly matters. Our wedding will proceed as planned. Emma stared at the screen in shock as Logan fielded questions from reporters. His answers polished and professional and completely devoid of the passion he'd shown just days before. When asked directly about his feelings for Emma, he dismissed them as confusion brought on by stress and poor judgment. The interview ended with Victoria announcing that she bore no ill will toward Emma and hoped she would find happiness in a more appropriate situation. Emma turned off the television and sat in the growing darkness, feeling hollow and betrayed and strangely relieved all at the same time. Logan had made his choice, and it wasn't her. He'd chosen his family's approval, his business empire, his comfortable cage over the uncertain freedom they might have found together. Part of her wanted to cry, to mourn the loss of what might have been. But a larger part felt something she hadn't expected: gratitude, because Logan's betrayal had answered the question that had been tearing her apart. She hadn't fallen in love with a man who had manipulated her into caring about him. She'd fallen in love with a man who had shown her glimpses of his true self and then revealed that those glimpses were lies. Emma Harper pulled out her phone and began typing her resignation letter to Montgomery Enterprises. She would go back to New York, clean out her desk, and start over somewhere else. Somewhere. Logan Montgomery had no power to influence her life, but as she finished the letter and prepared to send it, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Logan's name, and for a moment, Emma hesitated. Then she remembered his face on television, the practiced lies, the easy way he'd thrown her under the bus to salvage his perfect life. She declined the call and blocked his number. 2 hours later, Emma was sitting in her childhood bedroom packing the few belongings she'd brought with her when she heard a car pull into the driveway. Through her window, she could see headlights cutting through the darkness. Her heart began to race despite her best efforts to remain calm. Her father's voice drifted up from downstairs, followed by another voice she recognized all too well. Logan had come for her. Emma closed her eyes and tried to summon the anger she'd felt watching his press conference. But all she could think about was the way he'd looked at her in his penthouse. The raw honesty in his voice when he'd confessed his feelings. Had that been real, or was he simply a better actor than she'd given him credit for? Footsteps on the stairs told her she was about to find out. Logan appeared in her doorway. Emma's breath caught despite everything. He looked terribly. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept since she'd left New York. You blocked my number, he said without preamble. I saw your press conference, Emma replied, not looking up from her packing. Congratulations on your renewed engagement. Victoria looked radiant. Logan stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Emma, please look at me. Against her better judgment, she did. The Logan standing in her childhood bedroom looked nothing like the polished businessman who'd stood beside Victoria on television. This Logan looked broken, desperate, and completely defeated. It was all lies, he said quietly. Every word of that press conference was a lie. Which press conference? Emma asked bitterly. The one where you declared your love for me in front of 300 people, or the one where you dismissed me? As a moment of poor judgment, Logan flinched as if she'd struck him. The second one, Emma. I had to do it. Victoria's family was going to destroy you, your parents, Andy, our sister. They had investigators digging into every aspect of your life, looking for anything they could use to paint you as a gold digger or worse. The only way to get them to back off was to give them what they wanted. And what they wanted was you, Emma said, her voice hollow. They wanted me to humiliate myself publicly and discredit our relationship, so I did. Logan's voice was raw, with exhaustion and something that sounded like grief. I sacrificed my own happiness to protect yours. Emma stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. And your engagement to Victoria is fake? She agreed to pretend for 6 months while I figure out how to extricate myself from the merger without destroying both companies. After that, we'll have a quiet, mutual separation, and she'll be free to find someone who actually loves her. Emma felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the tight band of hurt and betrayal that had been squeezing her heart for the past 3 days. Logan, I know you don't trust me, he continued, stepping closer. I know the scholarship thing looks suspicious, and I know I handled everything wrong from the beginning. But Emma, I swear to you on everything I hold dear, I never manipulated you. I never planned to fall in love with you. It just happened slowly, and then all at once. And by the time I realized what was happening, I was already too far gone to do anything about it. Emma studied his face in the soft light from her bedside lamp, seeing the truth written in every line of exhaustion, every shadow under his eyes. Why should I believe you? Because I just spent the last 3 days in hell thinking I'd lost you forever, Logan said simply. Because I gave up everything I thought mattered to protect you, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because I love you enough to let you go if that's what you need to be happy. Emma felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Logan, I'm not asking you to come back to New York with me, he interrupted. I'm not asking you to forgive me, or trust me, or even love me back. I'm just asking you to let me prove that what we have is real. Give me a chance to court you properly, without power imbalances or hidden agendas or family pressures. Let me show you who I am when I'm not trying. To be the perfect Montgomery heir. Emma looked at this man who had turned her world upside down, who had offered her everything and then taken it away and then offered it again, this time with no strings attached. She thought about her parents' advice, about the difference between manufactured feelings and genuine love, about the choice between safety and the terrifying possibility of happiness. 6 months, she said finally. Logan's face lit up with hope. 6 months. You said Victoria agreed to pretend for 6 months. That's what I'm giving you. 6 months to prove that Logan Montgomery, the man, is worth the chaos that comes with Logan Montgomery, the heir. Stepped forward, reaching for her hands. Emma, I promise you no promises, Emma interrupted, but she didn't pull away when he took her hands in his. Just truth. No more games, no more manipulation, no more trying to protect me from consequences. I should get to choose for myself. If we're going to do this, we do it as equals. Equals, Logan agreed, bringing her hands to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Emma, I love you too, she said softly, finally admitting what she'd known since that first night in his penthouse. I love you enough to give you a chance to prove that you love me back for all the right reasons. Logan's smile was brighter than anything Emma had ever seen, and when he kissed her this time, it tasted like new beginnings and second chances and the promise of a future they would build together. brick by brick, choice by conscious choice. 6 months later, Emma stood in the gardens behind her parents' house, wearing a simple white dress that had cost less than Victoria's engagement ring and feeling more beautiful than she ever had in her life. Logan waited for her at the makeshift altar her father had built from old barnwood. His eyes bright with tears he wasn't trying to hide. There were no business mergers to consider, no family pressures to navigate, no cameras to perform for. Just Emma and Logan, and the people who loved them, celebrating a love that had survived. Manipulation and betrayal and doubt to emerge stronger and more honest than ever. As Emma took Logan's hands and looked into his eyes, she saw not the Montgomery, heir or the powerful businessman, but simply the man who had chosen her every single day for 6 months, who had proven his love not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent acts of devotion and respect. "Ready?" Logan whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Emma smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them here, the risks they'd taken, and the trust they'd rebuilt, and the future they were about to create together. "Ready?" she said, and as they spoke their vows under the Ohio sky, surrounded by cornfields and the people who had known them before they were anything other than themselves, Emma knew that she was exactly where she belonged. The end asterisk like this. Video, if the story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional tales. Now, and share with someone who believes in the power of true love, and let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.